Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630.
WMAL. 8:37, Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson.
Hey.
Big week next week. Supreme Court hearing the case on health care, individual mandates. Is it constitutional? Shannon Bream from Fox News Channel, Supreme Court reporter.
Yes,
I hear it's going to be a very, very busy week for you next week, Shannon. They're going to work the heck out of you.
I'm looking forward to it. You know how it is with your job, that sometimes you feel like you get to be right there on the front steps of history, and that's literally what we're going to be doing next week.
All right. So you're following the Supreme Court, and you're also going to be anchoring and filling in for Brett because he's off next week, right?
He is off to a much-deserved vacation, and so what our setup is, I actually... I'm grateful that I've gotten one of the seats in the court, so I will get to hear the arguments.
Wow, that's hard to come by.
It is, and you know how that is. You put in your request, you keep your fingers crossed, and it turned out good on this one, so I'll be in there each day for, all the 4 different sets of arguments. And then reporting, as I normally do, but then because Brett's out of town, we've also got a setup where we are going to anchor special report from the Supreme Court.
Wow.
Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
That's huge.
Yeah, we're excited.
Well, I've been around Fox News at times when they're ginning up for a big story like this. And I know, for example, that probably right now you have in your possession a book that's about, 2 inches thick that came from something known as the Fox Brain Room. And you're going through that and you're just studying all the background on it. As you look at this case, are you getting any sense of where the various justices might be on it? Because they have some past cases where they've ruled on issues that sort of touch on this particular case.
Absolutely. And the government has used a lot of those previous cases to cite back to those justices, to Justice Scalia in particular, but the others that are considered to be the conservative wing of the court. But there are skeptics who say, listen, some of those decisions are really stretching it to show that it would apply here. This is such an impression or issue of first impression. There's never been a case exactly like this at the court. And it would be a stretch to apply some of those old cases. But others who are completely convinced that of those 4, so-called conservative justices, there could be 1 or 2 that will be, open to the argument that this mandate is an absolutely correct use of congressional power under the Commerce Clause or other clauses that they're arguing as well.
And I heard one person say that they thought that the one conservative who might be persuaded would be the chief.
That's true as well. I mean, people look back at some of his writings and his philosophy through the years and say that's possible as well because of some of the ways that he's viewed specific use of federal power. But at the end of the day, I think most people think, at least on that mandate issue, it's going to be 5-4, and the spotlight is once again going to be on Justice Anthony Kennedy.
All right, what exactly is the case? I mean, we're talking about the verdict, but what is the case before the court?
Well, the interesting thing is, this is the one out of the 11th Circuit that deals with the 26 states that got together and sued, along with the National Federation of Independent Businesses and some private groups. So it's the one out of the 11th Circuit where the court there actually struck down the mandate. They didn't rule that the entire rest of the law falls, that severability issue, without the mandate, but they did strike down the mandate.
But it's on the premise of that the mandate is unconstitutional.
Right. And there are actually 4 parts to the case. The first day they're going to argue whether or not the case is even ripe. They're going to spend 90 minutes arguing about whether or not they can hear this case, or they have to wait for somebody to actually suffer harm or to pay the penalty associated with not complying with the mandate.
Because the mandate doesn't even start until 2014.
Right. And so there's a possibility they could delay deciding the merits, which terrifies people on both sides of the case, but it's possible that they say, come back after somebody's actually suffered the harm, paid the penalty with the mandate, we'll see you in 2015.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Mm-hmm. That's day 1.
All right, so that's day 1. But if they say, we'll take it now, then what happens?
Well, they'll continue to hear the arguments regardless. On Tuesday is the 2-hour argument over the mandate, the heart of the entire case. That will be the battle royale.
Mm-hmm.
Then on Wednesday, there are 2 parts of the case, that severability issue, whether if they strike down the mandate, the rest of the law, the community exchanges, all the other tax credits and things, whether that holds up without the mandate. In the afternoon, on Wednesday, they're going to argue about Medicaid, because under this law, there would be a huge Medicaid expansion to the states. They say they can't afford it, and they say that it's an overreach of federal power.
All right, so there will be, of course, no cameras.
Right.
But they are going to release audio, is that right?
Yes, and that's always a huge bonus, I think, for people to understand the case and the nuances of who asked what question, what the inflection was in their voice when they were grilling the attorney. I think it's important, so it won't be in real time, but it will be pretty quickly, within an hour or 2 after the arguments. That day's oral arguments will be available online.
So will we know next week Will we actually have a decision from the Supreme Court next week?
We will only be able to start guesstimating next week because once arguments wrap on Wednesday, normally what would happen is the decision would be due by the end of the term, which is late June, but they can extend the term into the summer. They can also, as they've done in rare cases like Citizens United, the big controversial campaign finance case, they can call the attorneys back for more arguments. We have no indication what they might do, but the truth is the Supreme Court dances to its own tune. It makes its own rules. There are no schedules that are absolutely set in stone.
I can't ever recall where a case has eaten up this much time of the Supreme Court, 3 days. I mean, is that absolutely unprecedented? Because I can't think of another case.
It's not, but you have to go back roughly 40 years or so to get to anything comparable. And you think about Brown v. Board of Education was obviously something similar in the timing and the amount of attention given to the arguments themselves. But really, in modern times, it's virtually unprecedented because, usually a case gets 1 hour before the court. This is getting 6 hours. So it's certainly the justices are completely cued into exactly how important it is to future generations.
I know I'm asking you to predict this, but what's the feeling in the legal community about them saying, you know what, come back to us in 2014 when somebody's actually been harmed by this?
It sounds a little far-fetched because you wonder why these 9 justices who are very serious and don't play to the cameras and don't play politics, why they would set up 3 days and 6 hours of arguments with all of these states and the government and everyone involved and then say we're not going to decide it. But it is a legitimate issue that has to be hammered out. The interesting thing to us is that they had originally only assigned that ripeness question 60 minutes. They've added 30 minutes. So there's certainly some belief among the justices on the court that it is a legitimate possibility that they may say this case is not ready.
All right. Shannon Bream, great to have you on. Thanks very much for your insights, and we'll certainly be watching next week.
Hey, listen, have a great week next week. Good luck.
See you soon.